Hi, I'm Molly Wick. I'm currently a PhD student in water resource science at the University of Minnesota Duluth, and I'm going to share an essay that I wrote recently about presentation jitters. Recently, I was preparing to give a department seminar. I hadn't been too nervous until I started preparing the week beforehand, and then it became real. As I imagined myself in a big lecture hall full of faculty and students critiquing my research and myself, the worries started flooding in. Would that thing happen where my voice shakes uncontrollably when I start talking? Would I be able to see my notes on the presentation screen? Would people fall asleep or worse, attack me with critical questions that I couldn't answer? The topic of my talk was sensitive. Would I stumble over my words and accidentally say something unintended or offensive? Even as I tweaked and retweaked my presentation and practiced, my jitters did not abate. The morning of my talk, I sat down to try to apply some self-compassion and mindfulness techniques that I had learned over the years. Here, I'm sharing the mantras I jotted down and some exercises that help me recenter myself and feel good going into the presentation. If you're anxious about an upcoming presentation, consider these mantras and practices to help recenter yourself and reconnect with your purpose. Of course, the first thing I did when I sat down was send a panic text to my friend. She had given the talk at the same seminar about a month before and responded right away. "You'll do great. It's a very friendly, supportive crowd." A good friend is somebody that reminds you of your best qualities in moments like this when they're easy to forget. This can be really helpful in panic-inducing situations like big presentations. We're all inherently social beings. Our brains have actually mirror neurons that engage other people's mental states to help try to calm us down. My friend would actually be in the audience that day, and I could look at her during my presentation to help mirror some of her calm. So I reminded myself, it's a very friendly, supportive crowd. My friend also knew something I didn't about the seminar, namely its location and audience. I realized that it would be in a normal-sized classroom rather than a big, intimidating lecture hall that I had been imagining. And the audience would be primarily other students in my program. I'd been catastrophizing the whole situation without realizing it. Okay, I thought, let's slow down and take a step back. I considered what was causing my jitters. My fears really stemmed from the idea that I wasn't worthy or smart enough to be there. I didn't even have results from my research yet, I thought. And I didn't think that I was very good at articulating science. While most scientists spout off jargon and technical definitions, they sound smart. I'm much more comfortable describing my research in the most basic form. I was afraid that I wouldn't sound smart in front of a crowd of intelligent people. Ironically, of course, being able to distill complex science into simple terms is a skill associated with good science communication. I reminded myself, my value is not determined by how smart I sound or even how smart I actually am. Connecting the challenge and fears at hand to what is most important to me in life can help put jitters in perspective. Previously, I had done an exercise, sounds kind of geeky, but very helpful, to outline my most important values. This can be an actual field guide for when life gets kind of hard. To do the exercise, I looked up a long list of example values online and wrote down the ones that resonated most with me on little pieces of paper. I then arranged them out on the carpet in groups of interrelated values. After that, I picked the ones that were the most important to how I want to live my life. I also considered which values were already driving my actions in life and which were more aspirational, more challenging. Then I wrote them out on a piece of paper that I keep handy. It was that paper that I pulled out that morning before my talk, reviewing what was objectively important to me, not just what felt most important at that moment. I was quickly reminded that nowhere on the list of my values was a value about being smart or caring what other people thought of my intelligence. Instead, my list included values like exploration, curiosity, wonder, knowledge, learning, understanding, clarity, and creativity. Those were the reasons that I was in the field of research. Sounding smart or being smart were taught values in my American culture, were not necessarily my values. Instead, I valued knowledge in and of itself. But I don't think that our knowledge represents who we are or our human value. Instead, as a researcher, I see myself as a knowledge holder and a knowledge sharer. All I can do is share my knowledge and perspective openly, honestly, and with humility. But this talk did relate to some of my other values, like service, justice, and respect. I wasn't giving the talk for no reason. The purpose was to share my knowledge with my audience. One of the focuses of my talk was ethical considerations in research. Sharing my research story could help advance justice in future research. To be consistent with my values, I had to be vulnerable and share my knowledge. I also reminded myself to visualize a positive outcome. Now that I felt more centered in my purpose, I tried to visualize a positive outcome, which is much more productive than imagining the worst. Everything anyone created, from the chair I'm sitting on to the best TED Talk ever given, was a vision first before it became a reality. One tool to help do this is to imagine the best possible version of yourself doing the presentation. Your best possible self acts in alignment with those values and ideals that are most important to you, and acts in the best possible way given her circumstances in any given moment. I asked myself, what would the best possible version of myself do? How would she handle this? Imagining her giving this talk gave me something concrete to shoot for. Next, I reminded myself, I don't need to know everything. I know what I know, and that's enough. A piece of classic advice for giving presentations is to remember that you are the expert in your field or topic. Now, this isn't necessarily wrong or bad, but for me, it didn't feel quite right. I wasn't convinced that I was an expert because I wasn't really sure that anyone was an expert on anything. Sure, some people are more familiar with the literature, the state of understanding, the methods, technical aspects of their field. But the number one thing science and research teaches us is how little we all know about anything. To call ourselves experts feels like a bit of an oversell. Telling myself I'm an expert when I'm constantly aware of how little I know, it just fed my jitters. Instead, it was more comforting to me to remind myself that I didn't need to know everything to share my specific project and experience. All I could do was share what I did know, filtered through my lens of perception. And that alone is really valuable. We don't discover knowledge in isolation. The knowledge that I hold, however limited it might be, really makes a good contribution to a larger body of knowledge and understanding in the world. I also reminded myself that I'm doing the best that I can right now. I gave that talk when I was going through some health issues. My fears about not sounding smart were associated with the brain fog and fatigue I had been dealing with, and the fear went beyond just that day. I carried some guilt about taking the time and energy to cope with my health issues away from school and research. What if my froggy brain didn't cooperate when I walked up in front of the room to speak? And what if this presentation made it publicly clear that I wasn't actually fit to do this research? The push for high production in academia is ruthless. What if my health issues meant that I just couldn't cut it? I looked at these fears again in the context of my values, and there they were, values of compassion, empathy, and kindness. If those were my fundamental values, I owed them to myself as much as anyone else. I took a moment to acknowledge the hard work that I had put into the presentation, alongside all the external circumstances challenging me at that time. I was doing the best that I could, and I couldn't ask any more of myself, or of anyone else for that matter. I'm human, and this is what it means to look like. This is what it looks like to be human. Also, a reminder, everyone else is human too. And last, I reminded myself in the story of my life, this presentation is relatively unimportant. That morning, I listened to a meditation on the Headspace app to build self-confidence. The meditation suggested bringing to mind words describing you when you are the most confident. I jotted down a list: calm, connected, strong, clear-headed, smart, nimble, adaptable. The meditation reminded me gently that we all hold multiple truths concurrently. In one moment, I may be fumbling, and in the next, I'm clear-headed, and those moments blur together. Life ebbs and flows for everyone, and no one is at 100% all day, every day. If I didn't embody those words today, today would pass, and I would soon again. In the grand scheme of things, this day was relatively unimportant. After I had written the mantras above down in my journal, I spent a few quiet moments internalizing them. I felt the jitters abate and a sense of calm, confidence, and purpose wash over me. Where before the image in my head was of me fumbling through a talk in a big lecture hall with a critical audience, now I could clearly see myself in a classroom full of supportive colleagues, speaking from the heart about what I knew and cared about. I was embodying that list of words that I had jotted down. I could see myself succeeding, rooted in purpose, derived from my own values and my own definition of success. And later that afternoon at my seminar, that's exactly what happened. Thanks for listening.